Hi everyone, I wanted to show you how to make some simple altar decorations yourself, just using some clay. And obviously the advantage with making them yourself is you can make them as big or as small as you like. So if you need like a more subtle, smaller size, like maybe you're going to keep your stuff in a box, maybe you're in the broom closet, or you could make them large scale if you've got like a large altar space. The first one I'm making here is a little earth goddess figure, and all it is you basically make a snowman shape first of all, and then add 2 snakes of clay for arms and 2 snakes of clay for legs. Sorry it's a bit out of shot, but all the rest of the stuff is fully in shot. And once you've attached the legs, just bend the ends outwards and press the tips in to flatten them a bit just to form the little feet. And then use small snakes of clay laid over the head and shoulders to make the hair. And as you can see, I'm just doing that in sections like so. Basically what you want to create is a nice little body, little figure with a fat body, because the earth's normally represented as quite round and full. And just keep adding snakes of clay until you've covered up the whole of the back of the head. Now I did try doing this video a bit slower, but YouTube wouldn't let me upload it. It just wouldn't work. And I tried for like 4 hours, so this is the sped up version, but you can still see what I'm doing. So as you can see, I'm just adding those snakes of clay until the area is covered at the back of the head. And then just blend those edges in together, and then I used a clay tool to create the parting line. Now obviously with this figure, because it's so small, you don't have to worry about super detail or anything, and obviously I'm not going for like realistic, I'm just going for like a sort of just a very simple representation, just to give you the idea. But obviously you can make these as detailed or as minimal as you like. For this other goddess figure, you create this sort of teardrop shape with a sort of taller bit on the top, and then add a ball of clay for the head. And then you roll a snake of clay long enough so it will go from one side to the other and form a loop around the top. This is the arms of the goddess figure joined together over the head. And as you can see here, I have put like a little swirl pattern in the bottom on the body, but I do change that later on because I decided I wanted this one to represent the moon goddess. So I put a moon symbol in instead in the end. The advantage with obviously using clay as well is if you put the carving in and you decide you don't want it, it's dead easy to change by just smoothing out the clay again. And as you can see here, this is where I changed my mind and decided to put a crescent moon symbol on. And all you have to do is you just press into the clay with the clay tool to create the shape. Don't go too deep so you go all the way through the clay though. Next there. And then I decided to add the symbol for earth to the earth goddess little statue that I made as well, just to make it a little bit more obvious who it's supposed to represent. I might do like a full scale bigger one at some point where like there's like the continents on her belly or something, but I've got to practice my sculpting skills first before I do that. And if you're not quite happy with the positioning of the symbol or anything, you can always start again or tweak it a bit, as you can see here. Another thing you can also do is create flat discs, and you could put whatever symbol you want on them. You could have 4 to represent earth, air, fire and water. You could have 5 so it represents earth, air, fire, water and spirit. Or you could have 1 like I chose to do with a pentagram on it. And you know, it's completely up to you, and you can use these for whatever you like. You could have them as place markers for the 4 elements. You could have them as markers for the 4 corners or the 5 compass points, and you can have whatever symbols you want on them. And a tip when you're doing a pentagram make sure that you mark on the 5 points onto your clay first. If you don't mark on the 5 points, you'll get a really wonky star. So what you need to do is mark 5 dots on the clay, evenly spaced around the edge, like I've done here. So there's one at the top, one on each side, and 2 at the bottom, slightly closer together. And first of all, you get a snake of clay and you join the top to the bottom right, and then join the top to the bottom left. And then you need to join the left hand side little dot to the bottom right, and the right hand dot to the bottom left of the triangle, which you can see me doing here. Try and get the little snakes of clay as even as you can. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect, you know, as long as it represents what you want to represent, it's absolutely fine. This is another thing that's good for varying skill levels. Like, you don't have to be like an expert sculptor or anything. You know, you can make them as simple or as elaborate as you like. I'm not much of a sculptor. It's not something I've ever really done much of. So apart from I did my Ned Ferratu puppet, most of my stuff is very simple. But it doesn't matter, I can still enjoy making these. Because one advantage as well is obviously it's the enjoyment of making something and that satisfaction when you've made it. And I think it just makes your altar a little bit more personal because you've added items that you've created for it. There's just something about homemade decorations that I quite like. It's like when if you're celebrating Yule, or if you're celebrating Samhain, I often find that homemade decorations mean a lot more. And I know that's one thing I used to love when I was a kid, was making my own little decorations. So I decided to try and get back more into sculpting. So that's why I've been making stuff like monsters and things and trying to work more with clay. And I recommend you use some sort of oven baked clay if you can, because it's stronger when it's set, when it's gone hard. The air drying clay tends to be very porous, so you'd have to like paint it and then varnish it, or just you need to seal it basically, so it needs varnishing at least. But I also find it's very crumbly and breaks easy, whereas the oven baked clay, like this Sculpey stuff I'm using, is really rock hard once it's done. As long as you haven't done it too thin, it should be quite hard wearing. You don't have to use Sculpey, obviously, because Sculpey is not the cheapest. I got a block for, I think it was about 25 quid for a sort of medium-sized block, about the size of a house brick, or just under. And it's a bit thinner than a house brick. But obviously it depends on budgets. And obviously, you know, what I always say is when you're choosing materials to use, go with the best you can afford. So for years I used Das clay, which was the best clay I could get that I could afford. But obviously, if your circumstances change in the future, then obviously you can up-level the materials you use, which I'm hopefully in the process of doing. Not with everything, but I tend to try and get better paint and better clay. Everything else I still get really cheap stuff, because obviously now I'm not made of money. So here for this one, what I'm doing is I'm creating a representation of the phases of the moon. So the first one I created was obviously the moon itself, and then I'm doing the 2 half moons, then I do the 2 quarter moons, and then I do the 2 crescents. And I'm going to put those together to make a decoration, but I will complete that in another video because this video is getting far too long. But I thought I would still include it here so you could see how I made it. And then what you need to do is bake everything in the oven. It's a maximum of 130 degrees for half an hour. And I find in half an hour for small things, they're definitely properly baked. Keep an eye on clay when it's in the oven because you don't want to burn it. I mean, because I'm painting it, it's not going to really matter, but you don't want to burn it to the point where it all crumbles away and breaks down. And then the next stage is to paint everything black. And I like to do this for whatever, I've got a couple of techniques I use for painting these, and all of them require a black base coat. If you wanted, you could just coat them in black and then wipe off the excess paint like I'm doing here on the goddess figure, and it has quite a nice effect that it creates for the figure. I think that looks quite nice. Sort of antique type of pottery look. But what I chose to do for most of mine was use some of the metallic wax. This stuff I got from Amazon and Hobbycraft, and it lasts donkey's years. I mean, the silver and the gold I've had for donkey's years, which is why they're at the stage now where they're drying up a bit and I have to keep mixing them with water to get them to work. But the copper one's fairly new, so it does work really well. And as you can see, a little bit goes a long way. Look, I haven't finished these tubs. I've had them a couple of years now. But what I like about this is you just wipe it on your finger and then just rub that over the object that you've made once obviously the black paint's dry. And what I like about this is it sort of looks old, like it shows up the detail of like all those little new grooves and nooks and crannies. It was even showing up where there's traces of my fingerprints from making the clay. So I like that sort of almost bashed about old type of effect you can get with this. If you mix the gold, the wax stuff with water, because it is water soluble, you can get a more sort of solid gold colour. You'd probably have to do 2 layers though, I reckon. Or you just get some really nice gold acrylic paint. If anyone has any recommendations, let me know, because I'm yet to find my favourite gold or silver acrylic paint. And obviously I'm going to use this colour to paint all of the pieces of the moon that I've created. Then for the little offering bowl that I made with the water symbol in, I'm using copper, because I think that would look quite good as a little offering bowl for water. And also you could use things like this to represent the elements, like if you haven't got anything specific, or you can't use, I don't know, candles or whatever, or incense, you could always have a piece like this with the actual element symbol on it to represent that element. And what I like about this copper is obviously because it's a bit newer, it's creamier, so it works better. And I decided to do that for the goddess symbol, goddess statue as well. And what I do at some point, you'll see, is I get a paintbrush out and mix a bit with water just so I can get in those nooks and crannies a little bit more, because I wasn't quite able to cover some large areas of the black by her elbows and in her hair. And then what I did afterwards was do some dry brushing of black and white over the top, just to make it not look quite so new and in your face, just to tone it down a little bit. And you'll see in a bit as well, I also decided to paint the other goddess representation I made with the copper as well. Then another thing you can do is just paint the object black and then dry brush over the top with a little bit of white to make the details show up. Obviously you need hardly any paint on the brush. So what I tend to do is I dab the brush in the paint and then wipe it off on a cloth or on my glass board that I'm working on. Use the tiniest amount of paint possible. And for this one, I chose to do the lettering white. It just makes them stand out a lot more. Now obviously this stage is going to be quite messy because you're trying to get into some quite narrow grooves, so don't worry about the mess, it's easy to clean off. But just make sure you get all that white paint into the shape of the runes. This one is love, healing and protection. Or love, protection and healing is the order I've put them on the little tablet. Because you can do like little tablets like this just with little rune inscriptions or bind runes on for different purposes. And as you can see, when you wipe over with a cloth or a baby wipe, it takes off the white paint that's on the surface and leaves the paint in the grooves so that the little rune symbols stand out a lot more. And I did originally with this one put some of the metallic wax stuff on, but I didn't like it, so I wiped it all back off. And I think it looks better having it painted black and then having the white letters over the top. And as you can see with the goddess one, the one next to the pentagram, see how the copper looks a bit duller? That's because I've dry brushed over with a little bit of black. And then what I'm doing for this little goddess figure is I'm going to dry over with a tiny touch of white just to knock down that copper a little bit, and then I'll dry brush with a tiny little bit of black, like the tiniest amount. It just makes it look a bit more aged, so it doesn't look like bright, crisp and brand new. See how it's just dulled that down a little bit just to make it look a bit older. And obviously you can paint these to whatever effect you like. You can use black and dry brush with white for sort of more sort of stony effect. You can just paint the whole thing black and then wipe off the excess paint to create a sort of old ceramic type of effect, or you can do this where you create a metallic effect. Or you can paint them as any colours you like. You can have them as bright or as dark as you like. You could paint all of them black and leave it. You could paint them bright pink. Obviously you can make them however you want, which is another thing I like about making my own stuff. Now I did with this one accidentally break the head off, as you've just seen, but it just fixed back on with a bit of super glue, so it's no problem. It's easy to fix if you do accidentally break something like this. I maybe should have put like a little piece of wire through the head and the body just to make sure it's attached a bit better, but never mind. And then you just paint them to your liking. And that's basically it. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and blessed be, and see you in the next one. Bye for now.